Hey guys, welcome back to Throwing Wrenches Garage. I'm Tom, and now that our epic road trip down to Maryland is finished, it is time for us to embark on a job that I have been wanting to do for months. We are finally going to take the one-legged, open diff, non-pausey, highway gear 256 rear end out of this Chevelle and replace it with the quick performance 9-inch pausey 350 that I have built up in the basement. Now you guys saw that on a previous episode. I'll put a link to that somewhere on the screen here. In a previous episode of the channel where I actually built that up in the basement, and that's all ready to go. Now it's actually time to put that in. I didn't want to put that in before the road trip because, well, it's shorter gears. It would have performed less ideally on the highway. Also, I just didn't quite have the time to put it in and dial it in before that road trip. I am still going to need a new drive shift for that. And in order to get all that stuff dialed in, it was just going to take a little bit more time than I had before that trip down to Maryland. So now it's time to put that in. Now, like most things on this channel, I ain't never did this before. So this is going to be a bit of a learning experience. But the reason that I chose to do this way, by replacing the entire rear end assembly instead of just changing the rear end gears on my own, is that this is, believe it or not, the easier way. I also found it to be the cheaper way. So I mentioned this before in the last video where I built up the assembly, or just assembled the assembly. But to go ahead and change out the gears on the 10 bolt that I currently have on this car, to change out the gearing so that it would be a shorter gear, so something more like, I think it was a 353 or 351, I don't remember the numbers, and then to turn it into a pausey, just in parts alone was probably going to cost me, in decent parts, something like $1,700, $1,800 if I remember that number right. And then I was going to have to buy some more tools to figure out how to do that on my own, and then I was going to have to set lash, all of which I had never done, and is pretty tricky and pretty delicate. If you do it wrong, you're going to kill those parts in a hurry and leave yourself in a bind. This whole quick performance rear end that I purchased with a disc brake conversion kit, and I already have the disc brake master cylinder and distribution block up front. That whole thing for me shipped ready to go at my house was like $2,500. So this is actually cheaper for me to do than having somebody change out the gears in my 10 bolt, and I end up with a stronger rear end at the end. Plus, I get the benefit of having a 9-inch pumpkin, which means if at the end of the day I truly don't like the 3.5 gears and I want to change out to different gears, I just get a new pumpkin and I can throw that in without having to change the drive shaft, without having to set lash again. It's all ready to go. So this seemed like a better idea for me. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and drop out this entire assembly that's on this car now and just remove it and swap it out. Once we swap in the new assembly, we're going to have to set the car down on the axle weight, and then we're going to have to take a measurement because we will need a new drive shaft. The distance from the pinion on the axle, the pinion on the 9-inch axle assembly is different than it is on the 10 bolt. So that distance between that pinion and the transmission is different on the 9-inch than it is on the 10 bolt. So we're going to need a different length of drive shaft. I've decided to go ahead and just get a brand new drive shaft rather than mess with the one that I already have. So we're going to have Mitchell Drivetrain in Shrewsbury help us out with that. But I'm going to take some measurements off that. Once we get this all set, we'll put a call into them. You guys will get to see this all in one video, but for me, this is going to take me a week probably to get this done, as long as they can get that to me faster. So, or relatively quickly. I'm hoping they can get it to me within a couple of days. We'll see. All right, so let's get started. I got this thing jacked up in the air. It's on jack stands. Let's try to get this thing out. All right, so let's talk about the basics of what we've got to do here in order to be able to get this whole assembly out of the car. So this is, by nature, as a stock item, a 4-link suspension. So we've got lower control arms here. We've got a sway bar mounted to it. We've got upper control arms here. That's our 4 links. We've got our shocks we've got our coils. Those coil springs are under a bunch of tension. So what we're going to do, technically we should disconnect the brakes first. That should be the number one thing that we need to do. There's a flexi line up there. I can't really get to that easily, so because it's a flexi line, what I think we're going to do first is actually try to lower this thing down. So I think what I'm going to do, number one, is disconnect the drive shaft so that we can get that out and away, so that'll allow this thing to drop nice and clean. Then we're going to go ahead and we'll disconnect our shocks, lower and then the upper mounts. Then we'll go ahead and disconnect the sway bar, and we'll disconnect the lower control arms. Then we'll disconnect the upper control arms. I know I'm going to have a bear of a time with the upper mounts for the control arms, maybe even with the lower mounts for the control arms. It's entirely possible I may just have to cut those away because I had a hard time. That's why these are the old ones. The lower control arms have been replaced, but the upper ones I had a hard time with, so I just left them. So knowing that this was coming. So I'm going to have a bear with those. In the worst case scenario, I just cut them out, but we'll see if I can get them. Once we get this thing released and I can lower it, I'll put the jack underneath this and we will lower this down slowly, easily. And once it is lowered, then those springs will ease the tension on them and we can pop those springs out, hopefully not killing anybody. And then we can disconnect all of our brake lines. Okay, here's where we're at. So we've got our sway bar off and our drive shaft is disconnected, hanging down. And we removed the bolts, well, we removed the nuts from the axle side of the lower control arms and from the upper control arms. Those came off pretty easy. So the only thing that's really, truly completely holding this thing up right now are these little shock mount bolts. So now it's time to get the hydraulic jack underneath this axle to hold this up in the air while we go ahead and disconnect the shocks, because I do not want this thing slamming down, mostly because I don't want these things, those big coil springs, taking a holiday and going wherever they want. So, next step. So now that allows me to see my brake distribution housing here. Okay, so now I know what to get at to remove that. I'm going to need some stoppers to go in there to plug that up. So we'll get that off of there. And then we're going to have to disconnect that brake housing, that emergency brake cable. We have a new emergency brake cable that's going in. We also have new springs, coil springs that are going in, so we don't have to worry about those. Those will come off and those will be done. And then we should be out of here, and then I can focus on trying to get those upper control arms out of there, which hopefully I can get a gun on those and just zip them right out. We'll see. All right, first, let's just get this little guy off. All right, the old girl's out. Springs and all. And yeah, stock. I mean, she doesn't look bad overall. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And for somebody who actually needs a rear end and doesn't mind the open gearing and the highway gear, this is going to do great. So somebody will want it. So, you know, if you're that guy and you're in the Massachusetts area, hit me up because it's going to go up for sale, and it'll be fairly cheap because I'm not going to sit and store this thing forever. But yeah, this should work for somebody. Anyway, now it's on the bigger and better things. It's time to get those upper control arms off from the body side, and then we can move on to mounting the new. And thank God Declan went to work, because man, I need this space. And now look at it in here. Oh, there's so much more room for activities. Look at this. Big space. All right, well, I'm going to need it because I got a feeling those upper control arms are going to make me hate the rest of my day, but we'll see. Time to check. Well, time for me to go buy a lottery ticket because those things came out crazy smooth. Now, in all honesty, I chickened out on replacing those before because they were really giving me a problem coming out. The reason they were easy to take out now is because I had the whole rear end assembly out of here. So by having the rear end assembly out, I was able to get the impact gun in here and just go to town and strip everything out. So now that I got everything cleaned up and out of here, I think what I'm going to do is come back in here with a wire brush, clean everything up in here, and since this thing is all wide open in here, there's nothing harmful in here. There's all just some surface rust, but I think I'm going to clean everything up and then spray in a little frame-off restoration paint in here. All right, so I've returned from lunch. Got a little blood sugar lift, which is good because I was starting to lose it. But now we're back here, and let's take you on a little tour. So we are a little bit cleaner, a little bit blacker than we used to be. Things are looking good and clean. We hit things up with a little bit of the old rust inhibitor and the black spray paint. And yeah, it's just a little bit cleaner and nicer. Our new upper A-arms are in. We've got to torque them. But they are in right now. And I even swapped these around. I noticed that I put these on the wrong sides. They're the same. There's not really a left and a right. But I had them on the wrong side because the stickers were on the wrong side. So I swapped them because that was going to really bother me as long as I knew that they were incorrect. So now they're swapped. Shocks are all cleaned up. I even cleaned up the gas tank while I was under here. And now I think we're about ready for the next step. So we dragged this thing out of the basement and into the garage. Can't move this chalk. That's how Declan knows where to park. And this thing is now ready to go in, although I did forget shock mounts. So I've got shock mounts right there that I've got to mount. So right now I've got the shock mounts that I took off of the old rear end. Those were gross, so those are sitting in the parts cleaner. Those are sitting on boil right now. I'll go grab them in a minute. But once those are done, we'll mount them onto there, and then we can put this on. Now, admittedly, one of the things that I did neglect to do was to get the coil isolators, the rubber coil isolators. Free admission. I fail to do that just about every single time I order coil springs. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think there's maybe actually a literal medical condition that goes along with this that causes me to do that. But I literally have never once actually ordered the actual isolator rubber at the same time as the springs. It's always a panic. But I ordered them. They'll be here this week, so I'll put them in. For now, we're going to go ahead and get this whole thing installed without them. I'm not worried about it because I'm not driving it anywhere. It's not going to go any place without them installed. We're only putting them in to get this thing measured. And that's my next step. So now most of you guys will know that this funny looking thing dripping on the ground here, that is a drive shaft. So that is the piece that goes from your transmission, in my case, the Turbo Hydromatic 350, to your rear differential. Okay, that is a very specific length. There is a little bit of slop, if you will, that is taken up by the yoke that sits inside of the transmission housing, but it's not a lot, and it's pretty predetermined. So there is a distance that this, or a length that this drive shaft should be, and it is determined by the physical distance between the end of that drive shaft, or the end of the transmission tail housing, the face of it, and the yoke on the rear axle. I'll show you that piece. So this is typically the face that they want you to measure against when they're talking about the other measurement, as opposed to the backside of the transmission. So it's transmission to this face once this thing is actually installed in the car. But we've got to get it installed, and we've got to get it sitting basically at ride height in order to get that measurement. So that's what I'm working to next. You see, in order for the shop to be able to make me the right size drive shaft, they need to know that distance. They need to know that distance between that yoke on the differential and the face of that automatic transmission housing. That's the distance they need. They've got their own math that they can do to figure out how much slop that they need and how long the drive shaft actually needs to be, but they need that distance. And that distance needs to be measured when the car is at rest, because as the car moves, as that axle moves up and down with the suspension, that distance actually changes. So if I take that measurement when the car is up in the air like it is now with the axle drooping, it's going to be a different size than if the car is sitting. And if I get that drive shaft measured that way and made that way and sent to me, it's probably going to be too long, right? And then I'm going to have problems. So I've got to make sure that I've got this thing sitting as correctly as I possibly can before I get this thing ordered, and make sure that it's sitting at a comfortable ride height, measure it then, and then get it over to them. I still don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. Yeah, we're going to figure that out. Ideally, it would be sitting just on the tires, resting on its own. What remains in question is whether or not I can actually get under the car to take that measurement in that condition. I'm hoping I can, because that's the best case scenario. If I can't do that, then I'm going to have to figure something else out. But that's probably like tomorrow morning's problem, because today it's all about getting this axle assembly in, and not even necessarily getting everything hooked up. I just need to get it mechanically in place, mechanically connected, enough so that I can drop the car down on its own weight. I don't have to get the brakes connected. I don't have to get the emergency brake connected. None of that stuff. I just have to get this thing sitting under its own weight. That's all. So if I can do that, it's success. Then I can take my measurement and order my drive shaft. I can do the rest of the stuff at night while I'm waiting for that drive shaft to get cut. All right, so I've got lower control arms connected. Those were easy enough. Didn't even do them on camera because, you know, 2 bolts, guys. But what I did do, but it didn't show, and maybe should have. Let's see. We do have this thing in here on jack stands. And the reason that I put that on jack stands was that it's just me. This thing's too heavy to manage on my own. And I needed to get this thing pivoted into the right orientation. So in order to do that, I had to jack it up on the hydraulic jack and then put it on the jack stand so that I could rotate it to get it into this position so that I could get the control arms mounted. So now that I have that, lower control arms are mounted, not all the way torqued, but mounted. And now we're going to get the I think we're going to lower it, and then I think I'm going to try to put the springs in, and then I think we're going to try to get the upper control arms, and then potentially shocks. So that's the order of operation. Well, so interestingly, these upper bolts are being a bigger problem going in than they were coming out. This has been a giant pain to try to fit. It's tough to wrestle. She's a big girl. So this has been a trick, but let's see now if I can get this in here. Got to get my washer scenario right. My alignment is just off. I need something to align that better. By Jove, I think we've got it. Yep, I said by Jove. I think it's probably the first clean four-letter word I've said in about the last half hour. The rest of it was not on video or has been edited out. Oof. Oof de may. Yeah, this is a tough one. All right, so we'll just kind of bang that one through with the hammer to make sure it's aligned, and then we can move to the other, which should go easier. Once one's in, it gets a little bit easier to align them. Okay, we hate these. Yeah, that was just a pain to get these things on. So the problem was aligning those bolts. Could have been, maybe these things would have been easier to put on first, but I kind of doubt it. I think either way, this was going to be a nightmare. But they're hung now. We're okay. We're in. So those still need to be bolted, and then we'll have to make sure that we fasten them tightly, but they're on for now. And so now I'm going to just get those bolts on, and then we'll see if we can hopefully get the springs on here. I think we can. And if we can, then we'll put the springs on, and then we'll get the shocks mounted, because I think the paint on those shock mounts is dry now. All right, let's see how we're looking. All right, we're hanging. This is good. The question will be, can we get a spring in there? Okay, so here's where we stand at the end of day one, which is only, if I'm being honest, probably 5-6 hours worth of time that we spent on it. Outside of the little war wound on the head, that's just me making an abrupt meeting with a brake bracket while I was trying to position the axle assembly. Outside of that, no real casualties, but we now have the rear end in. The upper and lower control arms are attached, not torqued down yet, but attached. And shock mounts are not attached yet. Those are still drying, and shocks aren't attached yet. The springs will not go in with the upper and lower control arms in. The upper control arms were such a gigantic pain to put in. I now got to just rethink how I'm going to do this. So what I may do is detach the lower control arms because they weren't as much of a pain. Lower this down a little bit more, then put the springs on, lift it up, put the lower control arms back in, and then get my shocks attached. But I can tell you this, that's a tomorrow problem, because right now it is time to get family dinner going. It is Sunday, end of the weekend, but this will be coming up for the rest of the nights this week, because I really want to get this thing down on the ground tomorrow so that I can get this measured, so that I can get this over to the shop for a drive shaft, either to get the current one redone, cut, extended, whatever, or to get a new one made, whichever they recommend to me. But I want to get that done so that by the end of the week, hopefully before Friday for this video, I can have a drive shaft back in this car and be driving it. Because I'm confident that for the rest of the nights during the week, I should be able to get everything else back together in the car. I know I can get the brakes back in, I know that I can get the lead, and I know that I can get everything else hooked up. So that much should be fine once I can get this thing down on the ground and measured. So that will be tomorrow's problem. See you then. All right, so we're on to day 2. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is. Day 2 now. I had sort of fits and starts thinking about this last night, so I made myself a cheat sheet of the things that I have to get done, because this is not a hard job, but I started thinking about it and it's kind of a complicated job. There's a bunch of steps that have to be done, and they've got to be done in the right order in order for this thing to happen, or happen correctly. And I know that I got to get that drive shaft measured, which means I got to get this thing sitting on its own weight. A couple things I got to do to make that happen. Now, I looked at sort of getting some wheel blocks to set this thing down on and get it lifted enough so that I can get underneath and measure it. Quite frankly, they don't get great reviews. They're also like $200-300, and I got to wait a couple days for them to come in. So I decided to go another route. So let me show you the list I made first. So here's the list. Going to install the springs, going to replace some wheel studs, tell you about that in a second. Going to build some cribs. That's what I'm going to do next. Then we'll measure drive shaft. I got to paint the rotors, install the brake lines, bleed the brakes, install the parking brake cables, adjust the parking brake, torque all the bolts, fill the fluid, install the drive shaft, and then I got to brake in the rear end. So that's a lot of stuff. So what I'm going to do first here is build cribs. So I went to the Depot of Homes and bought a crap ton of 2x4s. I got the saw set up now. I don't like creating sawdust in the garage, but there's rain. And so as much as I don't like having sawdust in the garage, I like the threat of electrocution even less. So I'm going to cut in here and just deal with the consequences of that. So I'm going to cut these things down into 1-foot chunks, and then we're going to make some cribs, however tall that gets us. It should be around 1 foot. Then I'll have them so that I can use this in the future. So that's step 1. So we've cut a little bit more wood than we need, but that's 3 piles, extra pile. That's what we're making, just cribbing. Those are going to sit underneath the wheels, underneath the tires, and hold the car up. And we got our first Jenga pile here that we're going to build. So what we're going to do, very simple. I'm just going to take this drill. We're going to pre-drill a hole just so we don't split the wood. Then we're going to run a screw into that. And then we are going to drive the next one on, stack them, stack them, stack them, ad nauseum. So enjoy the time lapse, because I won't. Done. Not real fun to build. Mostly not fun because I was in a hurry and I just wish these things were already done. But they actually weren't too bad. And now I'm glad I have them. All right, so we're assembled. We got, just mechanically, We've got our rotors painted, and yes, I did paint them with caliper paint. I painted the hats, or the hubs, whatever you want to call them, with black caliper paint, mostly because you're going to see that behind the wheel, and I just, you know, they're going to rust if you don't, so that's kind of gross. I wanted to make sure that they stay clean. Got it reassembled. We got everything connected beneath. We got our springs in. Still don't have the isolators in for those, but those are coming. Everything's connected that we got to connect right now. That's going to matter for ride height. So now we're going to slap the wheels on. And then I think what we're going to do is try to set it down on the ground first. Just make sure everything checks out. And then if that goes well, we'll jack it back up and we'll put it on the cribs. She's definitely sitting just a skosh higher in the back than she was before, which I think is actually preferable from my end. It's not, you know, jacked up, but it's a little bit better than it was because it was a little too low. So I think we're good. Happy with that. So now let's see if I can get this on the cribs. There she is, up on the cradles, up on the cribs. The cribs are pretty small, admittedly. You know, I could have made them bigger, but they're fine. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just talking about a static load here. I'm not monkeying around with this thing. I'm not beating on it when it's up here like this. And that's also why the jack stands are underneath it. So the jack stands are up in a high position. They're up there just as insurance. They're not actually supporting the car right now, but they are like a fraction of an inch away. So if something happens, I got insurance. Might not hold the car up, but it might give me that extra second to get the hell out of there if something goes wrong. So we're all set up, and it's time to see if I can take a measurement now. All right, so the standard measurement that guys are going to want, and I haven't yet talked to the Driveshaft guys, so they may tell me a different one, but based on what I understand, what they're going to want is a measurement from the face of the tail shaft on the transmission here, right there, and then back to the center of the yoke. And the center of the yoke is going to be the face of it here. So if I get a straight line distance between those two, that should get us where we need to be. All right, so that's going to just about do it for me today. That's all I wanted to get done today. Not as much as, I'm going to lie, that's not all I wanted to get done. That's all I needed to get done. But it's a pretty good day to get all of that crap done and sorted. We got my measurement out. Didn't get it in time. I was hoping to get that done much earlier today so that we could get it off to the driveline shop today, but we'll get it off to them in the morning. My realistic expectation is it's going to take them a couple of days, and I don't expect to have that thing back before the end of the week anyway. So now I got to clean this place up because, I mean, look around. It looks like a dang bomb went off in here. So time for me to clean up so that Declan can park in here when he gets back from work. So we were just on the way back from a school trip. We took Declan out to go take a look at Yukon, and on the drive home, got a call from Mitchell Drivetrain. Driveshaft is ready to get picked up. It's amazing to me because literally just called them yesterday morning. So just a little bit more than 24 hours turnaround, they're ready to go. So I'm pretty psyched. Headed over there now. We're gonna go pick it up, and hopefully we're gonna jam that in. Make sure it's gonna fit. Here she is, all ready to go in. So there's still a bunch to do. We still have to get, well, you know what? Let's consult the list. I meant to take you guys through this list yesterday at the end of the day and forgot. All right, so we installed the springs. We were going to replace wheel studs. Spoiler alert, could not. Because when I misordered the wrong size wheel studs when I was placing the order for the overall assembly, it turns out that's a whole different hub plate. So that's a never mind. We got new lug nuts instead. We'll deal with it. We built our cribs. Those are under the car. We measured the drive shaft. We painted the rotors. We haven't done brake lines yet. We haven't done filling fluid. We haven't done that. Installed drive shaft we can do. So I think that's going to be our next order of business, because we got the drive shaft back. It's time to test fit it, make sure it fits. So let's get underneath the car and make that happen. So this is the drive shaft, picked up from Mitchell Driveshaft. These guys were great. This is them right there, if you're curious. And I'll put a link to them in there. They're not giving me any discounts, but they were great. And you know, you got to point out a good company when you find them. So I will. They are local to the area. They're in Shrewsbury, a couple towns over, so maybe 20 minutes away from me. In the full disclosure bit, this was $599. So this is a full 3.5-inch steel drive shaft. We're not going for lightweight here or anything. We're not drag racing the thing, so that wasn't a concern. Just went with cheap steel. It is 1330 U-joints all around. I did have them go ahead and give me a new transmission slip yoke. The reason that I did that rather than reusing my old one, twofold. One was I just wanted to make it simpler and just have 1330 U-joints on both ends, and they were able to do that for me. The second thing was that the bigger thing is that this is going to be nice and brandy new, whereas my old one actually has a score in it. And so I didn't want to deal with putting a scored slip yoke back in to the brandy new setup here. So no big deal. That was not a huge sum of money, but that's what made this a little bit more expensive. So that total cost is for a brand new drive shaft, the new slip yoke, both U-joints already greased up and installed, and the U-bolts to install it into the yoke on the axle yoke. So everything I need is right here. I consider that to be a pretty good deal, especially from what I was shopping around online and looking at. I think it's a good deal. So now it's time to get underneath the car and see if we can't get this thing installed and make sure that it looks like it's going to fit. So now we're going to hoist this thing up. We'll put it in slip yoke end first into the transmission, and then try to place it into the axle and see if that works. Let's see what we got. In like a dream. Wow. All right, so we get a beautiful fit up here. Just a little bit of space remaining. And we are sitting at full rest, ride height. So I would expect that we're going to have a little bit showing there. And then looks like we got plenty of space, plenty of clearance all the way down. And then we're sitting pretty inside the joint here. So I think we are good. We are go for drive shaft fit. And that makes me very, very happy. So we're going to go ahead and put the U-bolts in, and at least get them snugged down, if not tightly fitted. And then we're going to move on to filling up some fluid, because I keep getting paranoid that I don't have any fluid in this diff yet. And it's just one of those things that paranoids me, that I'm going to forget that, get carried away, and then the next thing you know, I'll drive away with this thing and all hell will break loose. All right, let's move on to filling this thing up, because that's something we can do. Take our drain plug out here. Now this is going to take, this is a friction-based posi, and so that means it wants some friction modifier, and that should be 1 4-ounce bottle, which this is. And so we're just going to add that in first. That way the other 3 quarts or so of gear oil can help mix it up and dilute it in there. So Quick Performance was pretty specific about this stuff. They want 80W90, and it needs to be, ooh, this is going to be tricky. It needs to be GL5 rated. So that's what this stuff is. And we're just basically going to fill this stuff up until it starts coming out of this hole, which should be about 3 quarts. Very gross. The only way that could have been more gross was if it was used gear oil, but we got it in. Turns out the fastest, most efficient, cleanest way to get that in is to just squeeze the dang bottle in there. I tried to be clever with it. It did not work. It was messier. So take my word for it. Squeeze that sucker in there, deal with it. All right, that's topped off now. So we've got 3 quarts in there plus the friction modifier. So we're set, kept off, topped off. We do need to get new U-bolts. I snapped one. Whoops. So that's okay. We'll get some of those tomorrow. Not a big deal. But now I do want to get the brakes hooked up. So let me show you what we got for brake lines, because they did send some stuff with the kit. So the kit from Quick Performance. Again, you guys saw me assemble the disc brakes physically on the actual axle assembly. But here we've got the line. So we've got this line here, which is the flex line that's going to go off from our main hard line from the brakes that's coming from the master cylinder. This will tie into that and then head off over to the center of the pumpkin, of the center of the differential. That then goes into this T line, or this T adapter, and that splits off to one of each of these lines. These lines then go off to the calipers on either side of the car, the left and the right, and plug into that. Now we've got 2 adapter fittings here because these are AN line fittings. So these 2 adapters, they give you 2 depending upon, I think, what kind of flares you have. Yeah, there's just 2 different kinds of internals for those flares. So we have 2 that we can use depending upon what we have in here. And then these are the adapters for the actual calipers themselves. So we'll screw these into the calipers. And this is what will convert those into AN fittings so that we can attach those to these. So we're just going to go ahead and run these. I say that like it's going to take me 2 seconds. You know this is probably going to be a problem, right? What isn't? All right, let's get to work on this. All right, I'm going to say it's this one. It's hard for me to tell. Let's see, focus. But if you look at these two, the thing that's in common is that they're flat. That hole in the center, it's flattened. It does not come up at a complete cone, which is what the other one does. Also, these fittings, the same outer shape. This one's completely different. So I'm guessing there's something to that too. But mostly it's the fitting on the inside. These are for one kind of flare fitting versus the other. So we're going to see if these fit. All right, so we took the old banjo bolt right out of here. That's this guy. Hello. We're going to save him because, well, quite frankly, banjo bolts are kind of hard to come by. So we'll save him for another day. But he is going to get replaced. He's going to get replaced with this little guy. That's the idea anyway. Yeah. Well, I'm breeding the Blakes. Breeding the Blakes? Blading the breeks. Breeding the wave of the neck of the waves. What are you doing here? What are we doing here? I'm breeding. I'm getting the air out of the brake lines. I did this already on the passenger side, and I got no help today. So I'm using this thing, which I don't love. It's a little cheapy vacuum brake bleeder. I think it's going to get the job done, but it's pretty tedious. So I started on the passenger side rear. That's what you're supposed to do, by the way. Always start from the furthest wheel away from the master cylinder, and then work your way to the closest. So we're going to do all 4 wheels since we opened this up. And now I'm going to head over here and do the driver's side rear, and hopefully we get some magic to happen here and we get brakes. We'll see. Alright, let's start these shenanigans. See how this works. See here. Every time I squeeze this vacuum, it's drawing fluid up from that bleeder line. And now every time I pump it, when the vacuum is first pulling, it's mixing in the air in that line with the air coming from that tube. So it's a little bit muddled. So you can't necessarily tell by that first stroke if there's air in that line. You got to sort of wait for it to settle. I think there's still air in that line. Try to draw this line a little bit tighter. there's still just way too much popping up. All right, it's late. She's still filthy, but she's back down on all four paws. And I think we're ready. We're gonna fire it up, just make sure the brakes are working. And we may take it for one quick ride to do the first 15-minute break-in. And then we'll do the rest of the break-in rides tomorrow, and we'll film those. So for this one, we'll just take it slow, make sure it moves and stops and everything does what it's supposed to do, you know, and then I put everything back together the right way. It's a true test. Brakes aren't great. There's still some air in those lines. I'm going to have to bleed it the traditional way. I'll need Declan to help me out. See if I can do that tomorrow. That's really the only way I'm going to feel certain that we've got all the air out of it. Break-in. I also looked up my brake issue, so I decided to go ahead and look at the instructions. I know, it goes against my nature. For the new disc brakes I installed in the rear, and as luck would have it, there is some adjustment that you need to do to those. On the parking brake lever, believe it or not, you need to adjust the calipers in. So it's a very simple procedure. You just need to take the spring off and adjust the caliper in. Otherwise, the caliper is not going to touch. So I went ahead and did that, and it's better. I think it still needs more adjustment. I'm going to have to get under there again. But right now, we're on our second of 5 15-minute journeys with breaks in between. Get this one done and then head back. All right, so good ride. That was number 2 of 5. I'll mark that down so that I don't forget. So I did the adjustment on the brakes in between the first and second ride, and that's just a real simple adjustment. There's just a lever on the parking brake that's normally got a spring in it. You take that spring out and just pump that lever up. And it's supposed to compress the caliper so that they're actually in sort of their preload measurement. So I did that based on the instructions, but it did not work out the way that I wanted. So I think I'm going to try that again. This time I'm going to take the wheel off and see if I can get peepers on the actual caliper, on the piston, and see if I can visually see that it's coming out far enough. If I feel good about that and I get visual confirmation that I've got improvement, then we'll try that as is for the third ride. If not, then I'm also going to go ahead and bleed the brakes again and maybe see if that's the reason why I didn't see a noticeable improvement in the pedal. But that's what I'm on to next. Okay, so this side actually looks pretty good. This one I got adjusted, I think, just right. You can see that little silvery, shiny part of that caliper. The pads are just barely kissing the rotor. There's just a little bit of drag on the rotor from those pads. That's right where the instructions say this thing should be. So this was a little bit backed off, but it's right where it needs to be now. So I think we're good, and I think that was my problem. They were just a little bit backed off. So the problem was, as I'm stepping on the brake, those pads just aren't touching. So I wasn't feeling anything. So put this back together and step on the brake and see how it feels. Brakes still suck. I bled them again too, but still with that self-brake bleeder. I'm gonna have to get one of the kids in the car. Bleed them the old-fashioned way. I just do not trust that thing. Oh well. I have got to still have air in these lines. Well guys, I think I got to put a pin in it for now. And that means turning this into what I don't normally do, and that's a two-parter. We almost never do two-parters here, but I think I gotta. And the reason that I think I gotta is I can't really get this thing to stop reliably. I still got to break in the rear end. I've got some rides on it, but not the 5 rides that I need to get it fully broken in. And I really can't do anything fun on camera with it until I get it broken in. And I don't feel safe driving it really any further with my foot going to the floor. So I got to figure out what's going on to the brakes, and I'm kind of out of time for that. So I think what I'm going to try to do is wrap this thing up, put it together in an episode for you, and get that out, and then follow it up as quick as I can with the next episode, which is me figuring out these brakes somehow, and then getting this thing out and maybe doing some glorious 2-wheel burnouts with it. I hope. Maybe. Hopefully. Someday. We'll see. But that's the plan. That's the idea. So hopefully that's what we're going to be coming back with. So sorry guys to disappoint, but sometimes that's the way it rolls. All right guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, keep throwing wrenches.